The Story of the Penny. I cannot begin to relate my history, said the penny, without expressing my astonishment at the small consideration in which I am had. I wouldn't give a penny for it. It isn't worth a penny. Such are the expressions which we continually hear, and yet truly a man might as well despise the particles of flour that make up his loaf of bread. People say it is pride in me. That may be and it may be not. But if it be, why shouldn't a penny have at least that kind of pride which we call self-respect? I was made to be a penny. I was wanted to be a penny. I was never expected to be anything else. Therefore, why should I be mortified at being only a penny? I am all that I was intended to be, and a silver dollar can be no more. Pride indeed. Why, even Beechamwell here is proud, I dare say, and only because she is not a russeting, while I think... Well, never mind, but I have bought a good many apples in my day and ought to know something about them. Only a penny. People can't bargain so well without me, I can tell you. Just go into the market to buy a cabbage, or into the street to buy a newspaper and let me stay at home. See how you will fare then. Indeed, when there is a question of parting with me, I am precious enough in some people's eyes, but it hardly makes up for the abuse I get from other quarters. There is indeed one pretty large class of the community who always think me worth picking up, though they are over ready to part with me. To them alone would I unfold the secrets of my past life. I might have lain in a man's purse forever and rubbed down all the finer parts of my nature against various hard-headed coins, but there is something in the solitude of a boy's pocket which touches all the sympathies of our nature, even beforehand. I am not, however, continued the penny, I am not at all of friend Beechamwell's temperament. In fact, I never had but one impression made on me in my life. To be sure, that was permanent, and such as time only can efface, though no doubt he will one day soften down my most prominent points and enable me to move through society with a calm and even exterior. For it happens, oddly enough, that while beneath the pressure of years the human face divine grows wrinkled and sometimes sharp, a penny grows smooth and polished, a little darker and thinner perhaps than formerly, but with as good business faculties as ever. When that time comes, said the penny, we refuse to tell our age. But until then we are perfectly communicative. I would at once tell you how old I am, but that you can see for yourself. I shall not give you a detailed account of my origin, nor of the fire and water through which I passed in order to become a penny. If, when you grow up, you are still curious about the matter, you may cross over to England, and there, down in Cornwall, you will find what may be called my birthplace, and can learn with full particulars why I left it. Neither shall I relate how I was pressed and clipped and weighed at the mint, nor speak of the first few times that I went to market and changed hands. My present history will begin with the pocket of a rich old gentleman, into which I found my way one afternoon, along with a large variety of the circulating medium. You do use such big words, said Carl. Because I have travelled a great deal, said the penny. It is the fashion. But to return to the pocket. What a pocket it was! At the bottom lay an overfed pocketbook bursting with bank bills new and old, while another of like dimensions held more value, snugly stowed away in notes and bonds. The leather purse in which I lay had one end for pennies and the other for gold and silver. But with my usual love of bright company, when the old gentleman slipped me in among a parcel of dingy pennies, I slipped out again and ran in among the half-eagles, for I was the only new penny the old gentleman had, and as by right I belonged about a half to him and a half to the bank. The cashier and he had some words as to which should carry me off. I believe the old gentleman chuckled over me half the way home. If this part of my story teaches nothing else, said the penny, with a moralising air as he stared at the ceiling, it will at least show the folly of going out of one's proper place. Had I been content to lodge with the pennies, I should but have been set to do a penny's work. As it was, I was made to do the work of an eagle, for which I was totally unfit. It fell out thus. The old gentleman walked leisurely home, having very much the air of a man with a pocket full of money, as I should think from the deliberate and comfortable way in which we were jogged about, and when he rang his own doorbell it was already quite dark. A dear little girl opened the door, dressed in a white frock and black apron. "Oh, Grandpa," she said, "I'm so glad you've come, because there's a little boy been waiting here ever so long for $10. "Well, my dear," said the old gentleman, $10 is worth waiting for. But he's in a great hurry to get home before dark, because he says the children have got no bread for supper till he buys it," said the little girl. "He brought a pair of boots and shoes for you, Grandpa. His father's very poor, he says." "Is he?" said the old gentleman. "Then I'm afraid my boots won't be worth much. However, Nanny, my dear, you may take him the money for 'em since they're here." "Shall I fetch you a light, Grandpa?" said the child. "It's too dark to see." "No, no, not a bit of it. I know how $10 feels well enough. He shall have a gold piece, for the first time in his life, I'll warrant. It is too dark to read bank bills." And opening the most precious end of his purse, the old gentleman's unerring thumb and finger drew forth me and laid me in the little girl's open palm. The soft little hand closed upon me, and down she ran to the lower entry. "There," she said, "here it is. Grandpa says he guesses that's the first gold piece you've ever had. Have you got a great many little brothers and sisters?" "This ain't gold," said the boy, too busy examining me to heed her last question. "He's made a mistake. This is only a penny." "Oh, well, I'll take it back to him then," said the little messenger. "I suppose he couldn't see in the dark." And away she ran. The old gentleman by this time was enjoying his slippers and the newspaper between a blazing fire and 2 long candles in tall silver candlesticks. "Grandpa," said the child, laying her hand on his knee, "do you know what you did in the dark? You gave that boy a penny instead of a gold piece. Wasn't it funny?" "Hey, what?" said the old gentleman, moving his paper far enough to one side to see the little speaker. "Gave him a penny instead of a gold piece? Nonsense." "But you did, Grandpa," urged the child. "See here, he gave it right back to me. It was so dark, you know, and he took it to the window to look, and he said directly it was only a penny." "Which he had kept in his hand for the purpose, I'll warrant," said the old man. "Took it to the window, did he?" "Yes, to slip it into his pocket. He needn't think to play off that game upon me." "But only look at it, Grandpa," said the child. "See, it's only a penny. I'm sure he didn't change it." "I don't want to look at it," he said, putting away her hand. "All stuff, my dear. It was as good an eagle as ever came out of the mint. Don't I know the feel of one? And didn't I take it out of the gold end of my purse, where I never put copper? Bad boy, no doubt. You mustn't go back to him. Here, William." "But he looked good, Grandpa," said the child, "and so sorry." "He'll look sorry now, I'll be bound," said the old man. "I say, William, take this penny back to that boy and tell him to be off with it, and not to show his face here again." The command was strictly obeyed, and my new owner, after a vain attempt to move the waiter, carried me into the street and sat down on the next doorstep. Never in my life have I felt so grieved at being only a penny as then. The boy turned me over and over, and looked at me and read my date with a bewildered air, as if he did not know what he was doing, and I, alas, who could have testified to his honesty, had no voice to speak. At length he seemed to comprehend his loss, for dropping me on the pavement he sank his head on his hands, and the hot tears fell fast down from his face upon mine. Then, in a sudden passion of grief and excitement, he caught me up and threw me from him as far as he could, and I, who had been too proud to associate with pennies, now fell to the very bottom of an inglorious heap of mud. As I lay there half smothered, I could hear the steps of the boy, who soon, repenting of his rashness, now sought me, inasmuch as I was better than nothing. But he sought in vain. He couldn't see me, and I couldn't see him, especially as there was but little lamplight to see by, and he presently walked away. "I am not good at reckoning time," said the penny, "but I should think I might have lain there about a week, the mud heap having in the meantime changed to one of dust, when a furious shower arose one afternoon, or I should say rather came down, and not only were dust and mud swept away, but the rain even washed my face for me, and left me almost as bright as ever, high and dry upon a clean paving stone. I felt so pleased and refreshed with being able to look about once more, that what next would become of me hardly cost a thought, and very wet and shiny I lay there, basking in the late sunshine." "I thought you said you were high and dry," said Carl. "That is a phrase which we use," replied the penny. "I was high and dry in one sense, quite lifted above the little streams of water that gurgled about among the paving stones, though the raindrops were not wiped off my face, and as I lay there I suddenly felt myself picked up by a most careful little finger and thumb, which had no desire to get wet or muddy. They belonged to a little girl about 10 years old. "You pretty penny," she said admiringly. "How bright and nice you do look, and how funny it is that I should find you. I never found anything before. I wonder how you came here. I hope some poor child didn't lose you." While she thus expressed her opinion, I was busy making up mine, and truly it was a pleasant one. Her calico frock was of an indescribable brown, formed by the fading together of all the bright colours that had once enlivened it. Water and soap and long wear had done this, but soap and water had also kept it clean, and a very little starch spread it out into some shape and displayed the peculiar brown to the best advantage. Instead of an old straw hat with soiled ribbons, she had a neat little sunbonnet, and this was made of a piece of new pink calico, and made her face look quite rosy. I could not see her feet and pantalettes, for my back was towards them, but I have no doubt they were in nice order. She was too nice a child to have it otherwise. Her hair was brushed quite smooth, only when she stooped to pick me up, one lock had fallen down from under the sunbonnet, and her face was as simple and good as it could be. With what contented eyes did she look at me! She didn't wish I was an eagle. Indeed, I thought it doubtful whether she had ever heard of such a thing. But I saw that her cheeks were thin, and that they might have been pale but for the pink sunbonnet. Whatever she meant by a poor child, little Nanny would surely have given the name to her. Suddenly she exclaimed, "Now I can get it! Oh, I'm so glad! Come, little Penny, I must give you away, though I would like to keep you very much, for you're very pretty. But you are all the money I've got in the world." Now for the candy store, thought I, for as she turned and began to walk away as fast as she could, I peeped into the little basket that hung on her arm and saw there was a small loaf of bread, so I knew I was not to go for that commodity. She did not put me in the basket, but kept me fast in her hand as she tripped along, till we came to a large grocery. There she went in. "Please, sir, to let me have a penny's worth of tea," she said timidly. "Got sixpence to pay for it?" said one of the clerks to make the other clerks laugh, in which he succeeded. "No, sir, I've got this," she said, modestly showing me, and giving me a kind glance at the same time. "It's only a penny, but it will get enough for mother, and she's sick and wanted some tea so much." The young men stopped laughing and looked at the child as if she had just come out of the museum, and one of them, taking down a canister, measured out 2 or 3 good pinches of tea into a brown paper and folded it up. The child took it with a very glad face, laying me down on the counter with a joyful "Thank you, sir," which I by no means repeated. I wanted to go home with her and see that tea made. But we pennies can never know the good that our purchases do in the world. The clerk took me up and balanced me upon his finger, as if he had half a mind to give the child back her money and pay the sum of 1 penny into the store out of his own private purse. But habit prevailed, and dropping me into the till, I heard him remark as he closed it, "I say, Bill, I shouldn't wonder now if that was a good child." I shouldn't have wondered either. We were a dull company in the till that night, for most of the money was old, and it is a well-known fact that worn-down coins are not communicative, and some of the pieces were rusty through long keeping, and one disconsolate little sixpence which sat alone in the furthest corner of the till was in a very sad state of mind, for he had just laid himself out to buy some rice for a poor family, and now could do nothing more for them. He was the last moneyed friend they had. In this inactive kind of life some time passed away, and though some of us were occasionally taken to market, yet we never bought anything. But one evening a man came into the grocery and asked for starch, and we hoped for bright visitors. But I had no time to enjoy them, for I was sent to make change. The messenger was a manservant, and with the starch in his hand and me in his pocket, he soon left the store and went whistling along the street. Then he put his other hand into the pocket and jingled me against the rest of the change in a most unpleasant manner, picking me up and dropping me again just as if pennies had no feelings. I was glad when he reached home and ran down the area steps and into the kitchen. He gave the starch to the cook, and then marking down on a little bit of paper what he had bought and what he had spent, he carried it with the change into the parlour. But what was my surprise to find I was in the very same house whence I had gone forth as a golden eagle. The old gentleman was asleep in his chair now, and a pretty-looking lady sat by reading, while the little girl was playing with her doll on the rug. She jumped up and came to the table and began to count the change. 2 and 6pence, Mamma. See, here's a shilling and 2 sixpences and a 5pence and a penny. Mamma, may I have this penny? It isn't mine, Nanny. Your grandfather gave James the money. Well, but you can pay him again, said the child, and besides, he'd let me have it, I know. What will you do with it, Nanny? Don't you know, Mamma, you said you thought you would give me 1 penny a month to spend. To do what you liked with, said her mother. Yes, I remember. But what will you do with this one? Oh, I don't know, Mamma. I'll see if Grandpa will let me have it." "Let you have what?" said the old gentleman, waking up. "This penny, Grandpa." "To be sure you may have it, of course." "And 50 more." "No, she must have but one," said the lady with a smile. "I am going to give her an allowance of 1 penny a month." "Fiddle-dee-dee," said the old gentleman. "What can she do with that, I should like to know? 1 penny? Absurd." "Why, she can do just the 50th part of what she could do with half a dollar," said the lady, "and that will be money matters enough for such a little head. So you may take the penny, Nanny, and spend it as you like, only I shall want to be told about it afterwards." Nanny thanked her mother, and holding me fast in one hand, she sat down on the rug again by her doll. The old gentleman seemed very much amused. "What will you do with it, Nanny?" he said, bending down to her. "Buy candy?" Nanny smiled and shook her head. "No, I guess not, Grandpa. I don't know. I'll see. Maybe I'll buy beads," at which the old gentleman leaned back in his chair and laughed very heartily. From that time, whenever little Nanny went to walk, I went too, and she really seemed to be quite fond of me, for though she often stopped before the candy stores or the toy shops, and once or twice went in to look at the beads, yet she always carried me home again. "Mamma, I don't know how to spend my penny," she said one day. "Are you tired of taking care of it, Nanny?" "No, Mamma, but I want to spend it." "Why?" "Why, Mamma, I don't know. Money's meant to spend, isn't it?" "Yes, it is meant to spend, not to throw away." "Oh no," said Nanny. "I wouldn't throw away my penny for anything. It's a very pretty penny." "How many ways are there of throwing away money?" said her mother. "Oh, Mamma, a great many. I couldn't begin to count. You know, I might throw it out of the window, Mamma, or drop it in the street, or somebody might steal it. No, then it would only be lost. Or you might shut it up in your box and never spend it." "Why, Mamma," said Nanny, opening her eyes very wide, "would it be thrown away then?" "Certainly. You might just as well have none. It would do neither you nor anyone else any good." "But I should have it to look at." "But that is not what money was made for. Your penny would be much more really lost than if you threw it out the window, for then some poor child might pick it up." "How surprised she would be," said Nanny with a very bright face. "Mamma, I think I should like to spend my money so. I could stand behind the window curtain and watch." Her mother smiled. "Why, Mamma, do you think there wouldn't any poor child come along?" "I should like to see that day, dear Nanny. But your penny might fall into the grass in the courtyard or into the mud, or a horse might tread it down among the paving stones, and then no one would be the better for it." "But it's only 1 penny, Mamma," said Nanny. "It don't matter so much after all." "Come here, Nanny," said her mother, and the child came and stood at her side. The lady opened her purse and took out a little gold dollar. "What is this made of?" said she. "Why, of gold, Mamma." "Think again." So Nanny thought and couldn't think, and laid her head against her mother and played with the little gold dollar. Then she laid it upon me to see how much smaller it was, and how much brighter. And then she cried out, "Oh, I know now, Mamma, it's made of 100 cents. Then, if every day you lose only a cent, in 1 year you would have lost more than $3.50. That might do a great deal of good in the world." "How funny that is," said Nanny. "Well, I'll try and not lose my cent, Mamma." "There is another reason for not losing it," said her mother. "In one sense it would make little difference whether or not I threw this little gold dollar into the fire. You see, there are plenty more in my purse. But, Nanny, they do not belong to me." And taking up a Bible, she read these words, "The silver and gold are the Lord's." "Do you think, Nanny, that it pleases him to have us waste or spend foolishly what he has given us to do good with?" "No, Mamma." "I won't get my beads then," said Nanny with a little sigh. "That would not be waste," said her mother, kissing her. "It is right to spend some of our money for harmless pleasure, and we will go and buy the beads this very afternoon." So after dinner they set forth. It was a very cold day, but Nanny and her mother were well wrapped up, so they did not feel it much. Nanny's fur tippet kept all the cold wind out of her neck, and her little muff kept one hand warm, while the other was given to her Mamma. When that got cold, Nanny changed about and put it in the muff and the other out. As for me, I was in the muff all the time, and I was just wondering to myself what kind of a person the bead woman would prove to be, when I heard Nanny say, "Mamma, did you see that little girl in those brown steps? She had no tippet, Mamma, and not even a shawl, and her feet were all tucked up in her petticoat, and—" Nanny's voice faltered. I think she was crying. I didn't look at her much, for it made me feel bad, but I thought so. Yes, love, said her mother, I saw her. How good God has been to me that it is not my little daughter who is sitting there. Oh, Mamma. Nanny walked on in silence for about half a block, then she spoke again. Mamma, I'm afraid a great many poor children want things more than I want my beads. I'm afraid they do, Nanny. Mamma, will you please go back with me and let me give that little girl my penny? Wouldn't she be pleased, Mamma? Would she know how to spend it? Suppose you spend it for her, Nanny. People that are cold are often hungry too. Shall we go to the baker's and buy her something to eat? Oh, yes, said Nanny. Will you buy it, Mamma, or shall I? You, darling. And when they reached the shop, Nanny looked round once more at her mother, and opening the shop door with a very pleased and excited little face, she marched up to the counter. If you please, sir, she said, laying me down on the counter, I want something for a very poor little girl. The baker was a large, fat man, in the whitest of shirt sleeves and aprons, and the blackest pantaloons and vest, over which hung down a heavy gold watch chain. He put his hands on his sides and looked at Nanny, and then at me, and then at Nanny again. What do you want, my dear? Said he. Nanny looked round at her mother to reassure herself, and repeated her request. I want something for a very poor little girl, if you please, sir. She's sitting out in the street all alone. And Nanny's lips were trembling at the remembrance. Her mother's eyes were full too. What will you have, my dear? Said the baker. Nanny looked up at her mother. What would you like if you were hungry? Replied her mother. Oh, I should like some bread, said Nanny, and I guess the little girl would too, but all those loaves are too big. How would these do? Said the baker, taking some rolls out of a drawer. Oh, they're just the thing, said Nanny, and I like rolls so much. May I take one, sir? And is a cent enough to pay for it? The baker gave a queer little shake of his head, and searching below the counter for a bit of wrapping paper, he laid the 2 largest rolls upon it. A cent is enough to pay for 2, he said. No, thank you, sir, you needn't tie it, if you'll only wrap them up a little. Mamma, said Nanny, turning again to her mother, I'm afraid that poor little girl don't know that the silver and gold are the Lord's, and she'll only think that I gave it to her. You can tell her, Nanny, that everything we have comes from God, said her mother, and they left the shop. What a nice little girl, said Carl. I think I should like to marry that little girl when I grow up, if I was good enough. The baker went right into the back room, continued the penny, to tell the story to his wife, and I was left to my own reflections on the counter. But I had reason to be well satisfied, for it was certainly the largest penny's worth I had ever bought in my life. But while I lay there thinking about it, a boy came into the shop, and seeing me, he caught me up and ran out again. At least he was running out, when he tripped and fell, and as I am noted for slipping through people's fingers, I slipped through his, and rolled to the furthest corner of the shop. There I lay all night, and in the morning, when the baker's boy was sweeping the floor, he found me, and put me in the till, for he was honest. But just then Mr. Krinken came in with a string of fish, and the careless creature gave me with some other change for a parcel of miserable flounders. That's the way I came here. Why was he a careless boy? Said Carl. I think he was very careful to find you at all. Oh, because I didn't want to quit the baker, I suppose, said the penny. And I don't like the smell of fish anyhow. It doesn't agree with me. You won't smell much of it when I've kept you a while in my purse, said Carl. I'll take good care of you, Penny, and I won't spend you till I want to. The next day Carl had tired himself out with a run on the sands. He used to tuck up his trousers as high as they would go, and wade slowly in through the deepening water to pick up stones and shells, and feel the little waves splash about his legs. Then when a bigger wave than usual came rolling in, black and high to break further up on the shore than the other great waves did, Carl would run for it, shouting and tramping through the water to see if he could not get to land before the breaker, which came rolling and curling so fast after him. Sometimes he did, and sometimes the billow would curl over and break just a little behind him, and a great sea of white foam would rush onto his shoulders and maybe half hide his own curly head. Then Carl laughed louder than ever. He didn't mind the wetting with salt water, and there was no danger, for the shore was very gently shelving, and the sand was white and hard, and even if a big wave caught him up off his feet and cradled him in toward the shore, which sometimes happened, it would just leave him there, and never think of taking him back again, which the waves on some beaches would certainly do. All this used to be in the summer weather. At Christmas it was rather too cold to play tag with the breakers in any fashion, but Carl liked their company, and amused himself in front of them this sunny December day for a long time. He got tired at last, and then sat himself flat down in the sand, out of reach of the water to rest and think what he would do next. There he sat, his trousers still tucked up as far as they would go, his little bare legs stretched out towards the water, his curls crisped and wetted with a dash or two of the salt wave, and his little ruddy face, sober and thoughtful, pleasantly resting and gravely thinking what should be the next play. Suddenly he jumped up, and the two little bare feet pattered over the sand and up on the bank till he reached the hut. "What ails the child?" exclaimed Mrs. Krinken. But Carl did not stop to tell what. He made for the cupboard and climbed up on a chair and lugged forth with some trouble from behind everything a clumsy wooden box. This box held his own treasures and nobody else's. A curious boxful it was. Carl soon picked out his Christmas purse and without looking at another thing, shut the box, pushed it back, swung to the cupboard door, and getting down from his chair ran back purse in hand the way he came, the little bare feet pattering over the sand, till he reached the place where he had been sitting, and then down he sat again just as he was before, stretched out his legs towards the sea, and put his purse down in the sand between them. "Now, purse," said he, "I'll hear your story. Come, tell."